Within the final hours of the Battle for Sotha during the Horus Heresy, the mysterious piece of Xenos technology, known as the Pharos Beacon, would be overloaded by the loyalist Iron Warrior Barabbas Dantioch. As a result, the Pharos would unleash a vast blast of psychic energy that would kill many of the assaulting Night Lord's Legion, allowing the loyalists to turn the tide against the traitors at the cost of Dantioch's own life. However, the aftershocks of this mass release of psychic energy would reverberate deep into the void of space, and would become noticed by entities from outside the Milky Way galaxy. Detecting the presence of life from within the galaxy, the hive fleets of the Tyranid race would begin to make their way towards the beacon, and would appear in force within the region of space known as the Eastern Fringes 10,000 years later. The first Hive Fleet to officially appear within the galaxy would be Hive Fleet Behemoth, and its arrival would instigate the first Tyrannic War, where Behemoth would scour all life from its path before being defeated and destroyed during the Battle for Macragge. Since then, multiple other Hive Fleets have made their way into the galaxy, including Hive Fleet Leviathan, Tiamat, Kraken, and Kronos. And yet, there are numerous organisms that exist upon multiple worlds throughout the galaxy that would appear to share the genetic heritage of the Hive Fleets. Some creatures, such as the Gene Stealers that were first discovered upon the moon of Imgal, were thought to bear no relation to the Hive Fleets until they were sighted amongst Hive Fleet Behemoth's forces. Others are rumoured to be descended from Tyranid bioforms that had reverted to a feral state. One such example is a species of predatory arthropod found upon the death world of Catachan, known as the Catachan Devil. Another is the gargantuan sea creature upon the frozen world of Fenris, known as the Kraken. This creature has been officially classified as being a type of Tyranid organism thanks to studies that were undertaken by the Magus Biologus upon a piece of biological matter that hangs within the trophy halls of the Space Wolves Fortress Monastery, the Fang. This piece of material is known as the Kraken's Egg, and was said to have been acquired by none other than Leman Russ himself, who, according to legend, caught the father of all Kraken before throwing it back into the sea, claiming that it was too small. But if the Tyranids didn't appear in the galaxy until the tail end of the 41st millennium, then where did these particular creatures appear from? It's worth noting that while Behemoth was the first official contact the Imperium had with the Hive Fleets, this isn't strictly the case. Technically, the earliest encounter the galaxy had with a Hive Fleet was with the arrival of what would be retroactively designated by Imperial records as Hive Fleet Colossus. Unlike other Hive Fleets, such as Behemoth, Leviathan, and Tiamat, the Xenos of Hive Fleet Colossus were not precisely Tyranid bioforms, but instead the Hive Fleet was comprised of a separate race of Xenos entirely, known as Zotes. The Zotes were a race of psychically sensitive centaur-like creatures which first appeared within the Eastern Fringes within the later years of M38. The Zotes themselves claimed to be fleeing unnamed oppressors and sought refuge within the Milky Way galaxy. But despite desiring to live out a peaceful existence and attempting to settle within Imperial space, the Zotes would come into conflict with Imperial forces during M39, in what would become known as the Zoroastra-Attila Wars, after being declared Xenos Horribilis. Hive Fleet Colossus would apparently commit their entire race to battle within orbit of Zoroastra, only to seemingly be destroyed in this conflict. However, the Zotes would later resurface during the Helican Crusade, where they would battle against the warriors of the Space Wolves chapter of the Adeptus Astartes, under the command of Bran Redmore, upon the world of Fresiax. Despite the fleet's evident destruction, Colossus would rise again during the tail end of M41. Despite being retroactively classified as Tyranids by the Imperium, the Zotes were not adverse to using more conventional technology. Many reports have surfaced of Zotes using bionics and analogues to conventional Imperial weaponry, such as flamers and power fists. Despite this, the Zotes were noted to be capable of using biomorph weaponry, such as bone swords, barbed stranglers, and flesh borers, although the process of bonding themselves with such weaponry was an agonizing process for the species. In addition, the craft used by Hive Fleet Colossus were not typical hive ship organisms, but rather conch-like constructions made from a stone-like substance. Because of the Zotes having access to at least a certain variety of Tyranid bioforms within their arsenal, it's possible that whenever the race attempted to settle upon worlds within Imperial space, that some of these organisms would also make it to these worlds. In this manner, some of these bioforms would become invasive species, and thus, without the hive mind or the Zotes themselves to control them, these lesser organisms would revert to a feral state, and over time evolve into new species entirely. This would make sense in theory, but in practice there are problems with this particular hypothesis. Fenrisian Kraken were noted to have existed prior to the events of the Great Crusade, given the legends that Leman Russ himself caught a Kraken on a fishing expedition prior to his reunion with the Emperor. Because of this, there must be another reason as to how the Tyranids themselves arrived within the galaxy prior to the appearance of Hive Fleet Behemoth and evolved into new and feral organisms as a result. Another possibility is that these creatures had arrived into the galaxy via lone hive ships drifting into the galaxy, or by means of the hive fleets from outside the galaxy launching dozens of mycetic spores from their ships in order to act as scouts, or were simply blindly launched into space in a desperate attempt to find fresh feeding grounds for the swarm. This would seem to be a logical conclusion to come to, especially given the fact that the hive fleets are well known for infesting drifting space hulks with gene stealers so that they may stumble across new feeding grounds by infecting potential explorers. But if this were the case, then why did the Tyranids not arrive sooner than they did? It could be theoretically possible that these spores simply landed outside the range of influence of the hive mind's control, and without any synapse creatures to guide them, these bioforms would become wild and untamed, becoming little more than simple animals. Such organisms could have arrived within the galaxy by having their genetic material being attached to cosmic debris which had drifted into the galaxy and subsequently made atmospheric entry upon certain worlds. This in itself is the most common theory in regards to the origins of the Tyranid-descended organism known as the Shelled Slasher, which exists upon the world of Dristan III. But strangely enough, there is a race that might have been inadvertently responsible for bringing the Tyranids, or at least a small number of them, into the galaxy tens of thousands, or possibly even millions of years ago: the Necrons. This is due to one particular technological discipline that the Necrons have access to: chronomancy. Chronomancy is the act of manipulating time itself, and upon the battlefield it will be employed to slow down enemy warriors or to increase the rate of attack within friendly troops. In addition, there have been documented cases of chronomatic or time chambers within Necron tomb complexes. These chambers are where cryptech chronomancers practice their skills in chronomancy, and are decorated with murals and panels depicting historical events. One of these time chambers was depicted within the story Devourer upon the tomb world of Kelrantir. During a Tyranid invasion of Kelrantir, the cryptech Valnir and her Lich Guard fled to this time chamber in an attempt to escape from the dual threats of the Tyranids and insane Necrons infected with the Flayer virus. In desperation, Valnir would activate the time chamber, which would send many of the Tyranid organisms millions of years back in time.
There was no time to consider the consequences of what she attempted. No time to replicate perfect conditions. She had to act now. Valnir shouted the activation command. Light flashed, sound stretched, the buzzing grew louder. Then the light faded, and silence engulfed the chamber. The aliens and the Flayers were gone. So were 3 of her Lich Guard, although Valnir found that she could no longer remember their names. A new panel on the wall caught her attention. Necrontyr forms battle what could only be altered Necrons and stylistic representations of the nameless organisms. A new event in the history of Kelrantir, but one that, now, had always happened. Such was the power of her art.
Because of this, it's always possible that at some point within the 41st millennium, similar events to those on Kelrantir had unfolded upon numerous other worlds, and Necron chronomancers from various worlds had sent Tyranid organisms back through time. This would result in the organisms being separated from the hive mind, as the Norn Queens would theoretically still remain located far beyond the reaches of the galaxy. As a result, these time-displaced organisms would revert to a feral state, where over millions of years they would adapt to their new environments, potentially evolving into beasts such as the Catachan Devil, or even the Imgal strain of Genestealer. Ultimately, it might be a question that will never be answered for certain. But what do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.